let's just go back and look at the topic of today and kind of put you in perspective when it comes to that we are talking trans, unisex, and intersex human rights, which you are very involved in. And now you are really speaking how deeply you've done that, especially just within your studies and within your activism. So some people, they see these words and they don't actually know what they mean. They hear that there's unisex clothing, they hear that there's transness, but they're not quite sure like what that is. And the intersex position is also highly, highly unknown. So let's just talk about how you identify. What is your gender expression? And what is your gender identity?
Perfect. I like the question because it's it's loaded, but then also it's an opportunity for me to create teachable moments. Because I feel as though there are a lot of stereotypes that come with the general sort of mainstream understanding of gender. Mm. Okay, so I come from a Christian background, and in my Christian background, I was taught that sex and gender are very much the same thing. And essentially the performance of gender is dictated by your sex as identified at birth.
Yeah.
So in my activism, I have sort of lent myself and sort of planted myself in the school of thought that gender and sex are two very different concepts. And in fact, the performance of gender does not necessarily have to correlate or be congruent to your sex and your sex descriptor as identified at birth on your birth certificate and on your ID initially, unless you changed it. I would say in my case, I was identified as male at birth, but as I grew older, especially into my teen years, I started developing breast tissue, and my voice never broke. My peers had voice breaking, but I would continue to be a soprano solo singer in my school choir, singing soprano and descant, literally even singing those whistle tones that Mariah Carey used to do without issues. Without issues.
That's amazing.
But I would say that the major thing for me, which was the first alarm bell, was when I started growing the breast tissue and not having a bra and not knowing what to do with the stuff that's growing on my chest when I have the organs that are supposed to identify me as male. But as a teenager, people could now see the sort of the tissue through my t-shirts, because our school t-shirts were not really designed to hide those kinds of things. So my grandmother sort of solved that issue temporarily by buying me, or investing rather, in vests, like undergarments that I could wear underneath my shirt just to conceal the tissue. But I would still get bullied in school, because I eventually went to an all-boys school where, you know, students would approach me and say, but what's a girl doing in an all-boys school? And I would say that's when my first sort of introduction to what intersex is all about, and how we as people don't really, you know, fully allow for diversity, even in our own bodies. We question our makeup, we question our physique, and doubt ourselves even in our performance of gender because of how we're built. And I think that for me, that took away from my ability to express myself and actualize myself the way that I could have fully become the seer that I am now, right? And I would say that, you know, when it comes to the sort of more liberal, more diverse ways of understanding gender, there is intersex. People who are intersex are people that would have sort of biological developments in their bodies as they mature into adulthood, that would not ordinarily sort of exist in someone who's a binary form of male and a binary form of female, right? And I would say that the first thing that comes to mind would be the growth of facial hair. And a lot of cis women experience that. The existence of testicles, for example, that might grow or develop when someone is intersex but might have been identified as female at birth. The deepening of the voice. And there's so many other characteristics, of course, which we could go into detail about, but for the purpose of this exercise, it was just an example.
Because now you've explained your gender expression, and your gender expression is basically how you walk through the world, like how we see you, how you present yourself, because I'm seeing you, I'm seeing a beautiful woman in front of me, and it's only in conversations like this whereby we actually have to give it a name, that how a person is being seen is how they're expressing themselves. If you can like have a kind of inkling that, hey, did I see an Adam's apple? Hey, did I see facial hair underneath the makeup? Hey, those kinds of things. When you look at that instead of how a person expresses themselves, then you are completely ignoring how a person wants to be seen. Am I right? Because you express as female, and you identify as a woman, because those, I just want to get those clear, right? Even though you discovered only during puberty that you are actually intersex, because some people, when they are born, the doctor knows and tells the parents, actually, your child has got ambiguous genitalia, or later they'll find out for another reason, it's the chromosomes, because sometimes people don't actually know until puberty. So did your parents know that you were intersex at birth, or did you all discover only during your puberty stage?
Yeah, I would say it was mostly during my puberty stage that those things started to arise. But also I would just, I would just end up in trouble whenever I would try and go to male bathrooms. Eventually there was a family meeting to discuss it, that whenever anyone was with me, that they shouldn't trust me alone in a male bathroom, and that I should be sent to a woman's bathroom. And that was decided in my teen years, that listen, after all the dramas and the embarrassments that I had being pulled by security guards out of male bathrooms and told, listen, what are you doing in the men's bathroom?
Yeah.
Like, and in English, the translation would be, you have such a filthy mind, young lady. What are you doing in the men's bathroom?
Yeah, sure. And you grew up being told that you're a boy and you didn't think you were doing anything wrong, right?
Yeah. And in my experience since then, I then became intentional to just use the female bathroom, because I was tired of being embarrassed and having people in the mall staring at me now, seeing this girl who was perverted, who is stalking men and sneaking into the men's bathrooms. Meanwhile, I just wanted to pee like other human beings. But because people see breasts on your chest, they don't even give themselves an opportunity to understand that this person is somewhere in the middle, and this sort of binary that we have of saying bathrooms are supposed to be for a particular sex and so on, and assigning that, it sort of limits people's freedom. And for me, it wasn't even a freedom of chosen nature. It was just biology. I did nothing to make that happen. And I think for me, in sort of now understanding and affirming who I am, I then realized that I was more comfortable in expressing my femininity than my masculinity. And I didn't want to go and have an operation to have the tissues removed, but in fact, I wanted to embrace that, and I wanted to celebrate my feminine side. So I learned how to use makeup, and I started dressing more feminine. And I started even exploring bras, even though my cup size is not as enhanced. But I enjoy the process of celebrating femininity, doing feminine things, and not even limiting the things that are traditionally seen as feminine to people who express as female. I think everyone should be free to be who they are and to express themselves as they see fit. Yeah.